Hello and welcome to this look at Theros here on PureMTGO.com. I'm Joshua Claytor, and today we're going to be looking at the white and blue cards that I think are going to see some sort of impact in Constructed Magic. We will go ahead and kick off with the white. Our first card is Celestial Archon. He is a 4/4 flying first striker for 5 with a bestow cost of 7 that gives the enchanted creature +4/+4 and has flying and first strike. Well, for the longest time, Sayer Angel, Singer Vampire, Air Elemental, these were 4/4s for 4 or 4/4s for 5 that frequently saw play in constructed formats. This guy I think is going to see a little bit of play in Standard. The 4/4 for 5 isn't the best body you can get at 5 mana, but I'm more impressed with the bestow ability on this guy. I like that if it were to fall off the creature, it becomes a 4/4 for 7 with flying and first strike. And I think that bestow really gives a lot of neat options for play. It's good against cards like Oblivion Ring, because it'll take the creature and fall off, therefore it's not attached and it becomes a creature. Do I think Celestial Archon is going to see a ton of play in Constructed? No, not when you can get Aetheling at 6 mana or Opposite Odd at 5. But I think there's going to be a nice little niche for this guy. Our next card is Chain to the Rocks. This is an enchantment that enchants a mountain you control, and when it enters the battlefield, you exile a target creature an opponent controls until Chain to the Rocks leaves the battlefield. I see this fitting in Boros aggro decks as a white way to remove blockers. Sure, you've got Shock. Sure, you've got Flames of the Firebrand. You've got Lightning Strike. This, I think, diversifies your removal a little bit. It may not be good enough for main deck, because you do want your spells in the main deck to have a little bit of reach. I can see this fitting into the sideboard of Boros aggro, of red, white, blue control, just fine. Moving on, we've got Chosen by Heliod. This is a enchantment that when it comes into the battlefield, you draw a card and enchanted creature gets +0/+2. Maybe if there's a good hexproof deck around, it could see some play. I don't think it will in Standard, because you're going to have stuff like Madcap skills. I like it for Pauper because it replaces itself. It gives a very beneficial 2 to the defense. It may not be a Pauper All-Star. It may not beat out any of the Umbras in Green-White Auras. But I think this card is worth looking at. Things that replace themselves sometimes are. So I would give this a go in Pauper. Next is Elspeth, Sun's Champion. For 6 mana, you're going to need a 4 loyalty Planeswalker that, with a +1 ability, puts 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens into play. For a -3, you destroy all creatures of power 4 or greater. And at -7, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. Okay, not too impressed with the ultimate, but you can't have them all be indestructible all the time. I'm really impressed with the Wrath that Elspeth has. I think against some matchups, you're gonna really like that Wrath power. But what I really like the most about Elspeth is for 6 mana, you're getting 5 loyalty and 3 tokens, so you're going to be able to protect her for a little while. And eventually, you're going to get enough tokens in play to actually use the ultimate as a finishing blow. I think Elspeth is going to see some play in a Super Friends-like control deck. I think it's not the worst thing that could happen to a white weenie deck. Granted, you're not going to want the full play set in an aggro-based white deck, but having it and Brave the Elements could overwhelm your opponent pretty quickly. Next, we have the Evangel of Heliod. He's a 1-3 for 6. Okay, not the greatest again. But when it enters the battlefield, you're going to put a lot of soldier creatures or soldier tokens into play. They're 1/1s. You get as many 1/1s as you have equal to your devotion. I see this as the white increasing spell from Dark Ascension. I don't remember the name off the top of my head right now, but you put tokens into play. I see this as that. More than I see it as being a weaker Geist Honored Monk or a weaker Scion of Vitu-Ghazi. I like tokens. I don't think this would be a 4 of. I think this would be a 1 or 2 of. I think it could see play, but I'm more than likely wrong. So we'll move on to Fabled Hero. This is one of the cards that is getting a ton of hype. I like it. I like it in a Auras type deck, be it Bant or Naya. Being able to grow your double striker. I mean, could you imagine putting Madcap skills on this? All of a sudden, you've got a 6/3 double striker that has to be blocked by 2 or more creatures. Not bad for your 5 mana. The downfall of this being that it doesn't have hexproof, so it's more likely to get dealt with easily. But not everything great's going to have hexproof, and that's good. We don't want formats that revolve around uninteractivity. I like Fabled Hero. I think he is going to see play pretty much in the same slots that maybe Silverblade Paladin would have seen play in. And so I think the Fabled Hero is definitely worth the hype. Next is Favored Hoplite. Again, this is going to fit more into a Auras type deck than it is in anything else. Putting the counter on and preventing damage is great. It really messes up with your opponent's combat. So this guy's kind of marginal, but I could definitely see Favored Hoplite getting some sort of play. Probably not over the 1/1 hexproof from M14, but I could definitely see Hoplite getting there. Gift of Immortality is our next card. This one is an enchant creature that when the enchanted creature dies, you return it. And then at the end, or at the beginning of the next end step, you return Gift. So this is a rather unique, very flavorful card that we're looking at here. We would want to enchant this to something that either has a great enters the play ability or a great leaves play ability, or great dies, not just leaves play. They have to die. With this, we could have an Eternal Blocker with the 2/2 for 3 that Fiend Hunter's a guy. You'll deal with a creature with the Fiend Hunter guy. You'll block another guy, maybe trade with it, and then you'll bring it back, take back the other creature, and bring back Gift. Or we can have this and the red devotion creature that deals damage whenever it enters play, based on how many or how much your red devotion is. I like Gift of Immortality, but then again, I'm also really partial to cards that return things from the graveyard. I think this will see play, and I'm pretty happy about that. Glare of Heresy. You exile target white permanent for 1 white and 1 colorless. This deals with Boros Reckoner. It deals with Elspeth. It deals with a Symbol of the Legion. It will deal with an Obsidian if they have decided to leave it back to block, since it is a sorcery. It's weakened more by the fact that it's a sorcery, but it still has a lot of really good targets for it. Gideon may see more play. I'm trying to recall if there's any other. No, Gideon, Elspeth, and Johnny are the white planeswalkers. It's an answer to Oblivion Ring. I think this card sees play through at least Standard. It may see a little bit of Modern play if the Soul Sisters deck were to ever get were to ever get bigger. It exiles Kitchen Finks, so it's not the worst. It's not the best out of the color-hating sideboard cards, but this card will definitely see a ton of play. Next is God's Willing. Target creature you control gets protection for the color of your choice until end of turn, and you scry 1 for 1 white mana. I have this in here as a popper card only. It's nice to be able to save your guy from a Doomblade, or block and not lose your guy to combat, or force through the last remaining points of damage. It's not going to see much play in Standard because you have Brave the Elements, and Brave the Elements gets all of your white creatures, whereas God's Willing only gets 1. So I'm willing to say that God's Willing will see some play in Pauper, but it won't see much, if any, Standard play. Next is God of the Sun. He's a 5/6 for 4. He's indestructible, but if your devotion to white is less than 5, he's not a creature. He gives other creatures you control vigilance, and for 4 you can put a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. The ability of putting a white cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield will never actually get this guy's devotion up, because the tokens have 0 converted casting cost, 0. That kind of seems a little bit backwards to me, because he has this ability to put creatures into the battlefield. You would think that they would set it up a way to where it increases his devotion. However, if you're just looking at his non-creature stats, he's not too bad. Cards like Sacred Mesa have seen play before in constructed formats. Sacred Mesa, it is the one that produced Pegasus tokens. Cards like a Symbol of the Legion will see play. I think God of the Sun is fantastic in control decks. It gives you a way to win. It gives you ways to block things. And, you know, if you ever get the devotion to being 5 or more, you're going to have a 5/6 vigilance indestructible for 4 mana. Not too bad. So I think he's going to be great in control decks. I think he's not going to be awful in white-based aggro decks. So I think Heliod is one of the better gods, and I believe that it will see a ton of play in Standard. And this is Heliod's Emissary. It's a 3/3 for 4 with a bestow of 7. When it attacks or the enchanted creature attacks, you tap target creature an opponent controls. Again, most of the bestow stuff I don't think is going to see a ton of play, but the versatility that they do offer, be it it's a really good late game draw to where you're going to make one of your creatures better, I think is just really neat out of the mechanic. Plus, again, if it's the creature that it's enchanted to is ever dealt with, you get a 3/3. 100-handed one. I believe this card is going to be more impactful on MTGO than it's going to be on or in paper. Of course, it's great against Twin. It is fantastic against Splinter Twin on Moto because you force them to have to go off for at least 120. But you also have to force them to not kill you on turn 4. So you have to be strong with your Path to Exiles. And then you have to live on turn 5. And you have to hope that you can survive past the turn you make a monstrous. Mainly I think he's going to be good just because of the amount of clock he's going to eat up. But in paper, nah. He's cute. I really like the ability. I never thought I'd see can block an additional 99 creatures each combat printed on a Magic card before. But let's move on. We've got Last Breath. This is a common. I believe it's going to see some play on Pauper. White decks having an answer to Nettle Sentinel or Atog that will force them to sacrifice artifacts before they want to, or an answer to Disciple of the Vaults, or an answer to pre-flip Delver. I think Last Breath is going to see a lot of play in Pauper. I'm pretty sure it's seen some play already, though I can't really recall if it was printed at Common before. I think it'll see some play in Standard. You've got stuff like Dryad Militants, Rakdos Cackler. So there's plenty of great creatures with power 2 or less that you are going to want to remove. But I think this is, again, more of a sideboard card than it is a main deck worthy card in either Pauper or Standard. We'll move on to Snarecaster. I just want to say that now we have 2 different sources of a 2/1 for 2 that disrupts the blocker for the white deck. Between this and the Azorius guy that detains someone on turn 2, maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. I like this more in Pauper than I do Standard or in any other format, so we'll move on. Here is Ordeal of Heliod. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and then if it has 3 or more 1/1 counters on it, you sacrifice it and gain 10 life. Okay, neat. You get... I really like these Ordeals because they feel like Zendikar Quest, but I feel like they were done a little bit better. I like this card because 10 life is a lot of life, and that makes me smile. I think it'll see a little bit of play in Standard, but that's it. Flailnix Leader. He has Heroic. He's a 1/1 for 2. Whenever you cast a spell that targets him, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. This is a reverse champion of the parish that gets better for each spell you have in your deck. Brave the Elements doesn't target. Ordeal does. The +0/+2 enchantments also targets. Unflinching courage targets. I like this guy because I really like the idea of growing my army. I think he'll see some play in white base aggro, depending on the amount of spells that the deck has. We'll move on to a strictly sideboard card in Ray of Dissolution. You destroy target enchantment and gain 3 life. There's always enchantments that need to be destroyed. Depending on how good they are against your deck, you may want this, you may not. But I like the option of having a disenchant spell for white in the format. I like it. It won't see as much play as I think the green one does, since the green one exiles. But it's nice to have. Standard, maybe some Pauper, but I think if this is going to be in Pauper, you're going to want Ray of Revelation anyways. And we'll move on to Soldier of the Pantheon. This guy's protection from multicolored, which means Dryad Militant, Rakdos Cackler, Boros Reckoner. Don't mean nothing to him. Whenever an opponent casts a multicolored spell, you gain 1 life, which means Dryad Militant, Rakdos Cackler, and Boros Reckoner are going to gain you a life. It's kind of unfortunate that Unflinching Courage doesn't get to be put on this guy, but it's nice to have an aggressive 1-drop for white after we've lost Champion of the Parish. I think this guy's going to see a lot of play in Standard. I really think he's good. And that's pretty much all I can say. He stops so much stuff. Granted, he doesn't stop Gorklan Rampager from trampling over, but having 2 of these guys against him means you're only taking 2 damage, which isn't too bad, probably considering that you gained 2 life whenever Rampager came into play. It gains life from Domri Rade, it gains life from 2 of the new Planeswalkers in this set. I think a 2-1 for 1 was something that Wizards of the Coast was long scared to print thanks to Savannah Lions. But this guy's really not all that bad. I mean, granted, I believe he is better than Savannah Lions, but it doesn't hurt the format to have faster creatures. At least in my mind, it doesn't. We'll move on to Spear of Heliod. This is the legendary enchantment artifact weapon. It's a glorious anthem, and it destroys target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. This card's going to see play. It's not going to be a 4-of because it's of the legendary ability, or not ability, but the legendary word, super type. Because glorious anthems get played. It's really good in the white deck. It's nice to have a source of repeatable removal in a color that doesn't really get that. But it's, on the downside, you have to be dealt damage first. Which, I mean, if you're taking away their best guys, not really much of a downside. This card will see play in Standard, and that is about it. I don't think it'll see play in Modern. Yoke Dox is an 0-4 for 1. This card may be a little strange to you guys to see here as a playable card. I like this card in the same way that I like Kraken Hatchling. It gives you a way to allow yourself to deal with their best creature while you're still developing your board. An 0-4 for 1 is going to stop a ton of things. It's going to stop Reckoner. It's going to stop the 2-1 for white that we just went over, whose name I just completely forgot. It's going to stop Cackler and Ash Zealot and Fire Drinker Satyr. It's not going to kill any of these things, but I like the wall here. It's a nice sideboard card to allow you to let your opponent do a couple of things unanswered while you are going about your own business. I like it. I'm probably wrong about this. I think it's going to be a sideboard card. But hey, I think there's some potential here in the Ox. Let's move on to the blue cards. Annul. It counters target artifact or enchantment spell. If there are artifacts or enchantments that need to be countered in standard, it will get played. I don't know if that's the case or not. I mean, granted, it's nice to have an out to Unflinching Courage or Madcap skills. I don't know how many of the Bestow guys are going to get played yet, but it is nice for blue to have a 1 mana counter spell for a god or a god's weapon. It'll get played. Aqua's Form. I like putting this on a Glade cover Scouts. It's the hexproof 1/1 from M14. It makes it an Invisible Stalker. It makes it an Invisible Stalker that scries 1. I don't think this card will see play in Pauper. I think it'll see limited play in Standard if a Bant hexproof or a Bant Auras deck is to be a thing. Artisan of Forms. This is a 1/1 for 2 that whenever you cast a spell that targets it, you may have it become a copy of target creature and gain this ability. Okay. I like this card as well. Not as much as I like the previous 2, but I just like stuff that copies other things. So it's a clone that can change depending on what you target it with. We'll move on. The Bident of Thesa. This weapon, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and creatures your opponents control attack this turn if able. I'm not sure where this is going to fit at. I don't know if there is a blue aggro deck. But what I do like about this is the ability that it has of making your opponent's creatures control attack if they can. There is something about a forced combat that really allows you to take advantage of your opponent whenever a card like this is in play. I think it's marginal for Standard, and it's not going to see much play in anything else. But it's fun. I like drawing cards. Breaching Hippocamp. 3/2 flash. When it enters the battlefield, untap another target creature you control. This is another way for Splinter Twin to win in Modern. They've got Village Bell Ringer, they've got Restoration Angel, they've got Zealous Conscripts, they've got Pestromite and Deceiver Exarch. I would run Breaching Hippocamp over a Village Bell Ringer or a Restoration Angel. Just because it lets you not have to go into white if you don't want to. I don't think this guy will see much play in Standard or Pauper, but I think it is going to be a pretty decent option in Modern, just in Splinter Twin, or maybe in Birthing Pod. It gives you another way to combo out with Kiki-Jiki and Pod, and it's a Horsefish. Curse of the Swine. This is what I see when I see this card. I don't see you spending 7 mana to remove 5 of their guys and giving them 5 2/2s. I see you spending 3 mana and dealing with their best guy. Because it's a lot easier to deal with a 2/2 than it is to deal with a 5/5. Dissolve, counter target spell, 3 mana, you scry 1. It'll see play. It'll make people miss Dissipate. But again, this is just another flavor of cancel with a neat tacked on ability in Scry. It's a role player. That I believe is for sure. Here's another one of the auras that when it enters the battlefield you draw a card. However, when the enchanted creature dies, you also draw a card. Again, hexproof. Maybe if green-white auras wants to spread into blue for Pauper, just marginal play. I think this will get 2 stars. Gainsay, you counter target blue spell. Haven't seen this card in a while. I believe it was last printed in Planeshift. I love it. It's a cheap way to deal with Aetherlane. It's a cheap way to deal with Sphinx's Revelation. I think this will see some play sideboard only. Master of Waves, protection from red. Elemental creatures you control get +1/+1. And when it enters the battlefield, you get a number of 1/0 elemental tokens equal to your devotion to blue. So for 4 mana, you're getting 2 2/1s. Not too bad. You're also getting a guy that has protection from red, so it can't get lightning struck, it can't get shocked, it can't die to Reckoner. I like it. I think it'll see some play in Standard, and maybe some play in Modern if red deck ever becomes more of a thing. Granted, the red decks in Modern are just aiming burn at your dome, so maybe not. Mnemonic Wall, we've seen this before. It's a reprint from Rise of the Eldrazi. It's a 5 mana 0/4 that lets you rebuy Sphinx's Revelation or Supreme Verdict. This card saw constructed play or standard play when it was last legal. I think it'll see standard play again. It's not the worst. It lets you get back Revelation, Last Breath, Supreme Verdict. A lot of really good cards that you can get back with this. Omen Speaker. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 2. A lot of people are comparing this to Augur Bolus that never misses. Except it can sometimes miss as well, because if the 2 cards you scry away are just awful, you're going to put them on the bottom, and then you're left to a blind draw. I like Omen Speaker because it does something that Augur couldn't do. It helps you fix your mana, in theory. If you Omen Speaker, need some lands, and come across a land in your top 2, you can put it on your top. And you'll have your land drop for the next turn. I think this guy sees play in Pauper and Standard. Just because I really think Omen Speaker is very good, and it's not getting a lot of the credit that I think it deserves. We have the Ordeal for blue here. 3 or more counters, sacrifice it, and draw 2 cards. Again, more of a hexproof or auras type deck. You're not going to be putting this on a blue creature, I think. I don't think there's a good blue aggro deck. I don't think you're going to be putting this on Aetherlane. So, marginal play at best, but I think it'll still see some play. We've got Prognostic Sphinx. You discard a card, it gains hexproof, you tap it. Whenever it attacks, you scry 3. It's a 3/5 for 5. It'll deal with the 4 forest for 4, or the 4 forest for 5. It deals with Gorkhan Rampager. It really helps a lot of fixing your draws, because scry 3 is a big number. Being able to look at your top 3 and adjusting your draws the way that you want to, I think is being overlooked on this guy. I think it'll see some play as a 1 or 2 of, maybe as a 3 of in Standard. We've got Shipbreaker Kraken, who's a 6/6 for 6 with a monstrosity cost of 8. So for 14 mana, you're getting a 10/10 that taps 4 target creatures, that stays tapped while you control the Kraken. I think it's neat. It may not see play in Standard, but I think it could. I'm not saying go out and buy a playset of these right now, but I just think there's some potential there. Blue decks don't want to have to deal with creatures, and when you are pretty much removing their best 4 from, I guess, pseudo the game. I mean, they're still in play, they're just tapped and they're not untapping. It's nice. This is the new Force Spike. It is counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 and you scry 1. 2 mana, I think, makes this less likely to be played in Standard, because we're used to I'm used to having a 1-drop Force Spike than I am a 2-drop Force Spike. I think it's great against early game. It's, of course, just like Force Spike was. It's deader in the late game, but at least you still get to scry with Stymied Hopes. This card's worse than Daze and Pauper. The alternate casting cost for Daze, I think, pretty much stymies any hope of this card getting played in Pauper, but I think it'll see some play in Standard. Swan Song. You counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery. Its controller puts a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying onto the battlefield. You do this for 1 mana. I see this getting a lot of play in Standard, Modern, Legacy, and possibly Vintage, but I don't know anything about Vintage. I like the idea of countering a birthing pod with this. I like the idea of them casting a god and then suddenly having a bird is really neat. I think this card will see more play in the Eternal formats than it does in Standard. Just because I think it really depends on the metagame for Standard. If you're seeing a lot of artifacts, then I think Annul's better. But if you're going instant and sorcery heavy, then Swan Song's better. The next card is Theros, God of the Sea. A 5/5 for 3 that's indestructible. Lets you scry, and target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. I'm going to try this guy out in Modern. I play a lot of Merfolk in Modern. I wish God of the Sea were a Merfolk, but it wouldn't fit with legendary enchantment and creature. I like scrying. I think this card is going to see play in Standard as a way for control decks to further fix their draws. But I really like the idea of this in Merfolk and Modern. Mainly because the devotion to blue is fairly easy to get because, well, Lord of Atlantis costs 2 blue, Master of the Pearl Trident costs 2 blue. So I think it'll be easier to get the devotion there. Plus, is it possible to Aether Vial this guy into play if it's not a creature? I mean, alright, we've got a 5/5 for 3. If I get to 3 counters on Aether Vial, I can vial this guy out, right? I think so. Let me know in the comments. We'll move on from Thesa and go to Vaporkin. I like 2/1s that fly, that can, for 2. I think this sees more play in Pauper than it does anything else. It is a answer to Delver, or Insectal Aberration. Well, Delver is secrets. It's not the worst against Cloud of Fairies. It's not the worst against Spell Stutter sprites. I like it. Just for Pauper, though, not for Standard or anything else. Voyage's End. Return target creature to its owner's hand. You scry 1. Unsummon variants have been seeing a lot of play recently. Vapor Snag, Unsummon. I think this could see play just because of the tacked on scry. Again, this is another one of those cards that I like better in Pauper than I do in Standard. And we'll move on to the multicolored cards, the blue-white cards. We've got Battle-Wise Hoplites. You put a 1/1 counter on it and scry 1 whenever you cast a spell that targets him. He's a 2/2 for 2. If there is an aggro deck, then he obviously fits in there. Or if there is a blue-white aggro deck, he fits in there. If there's not, then he's just a 2/2 for 2, and I think there's better options. But I think if the blue-white aggro deck exists, then he'll see play. If it doesn't, he won't. Okay, there we go. We've got this guy who's getting a lot of hype. Daxos of Meletis. Can't be blocked by creatures of power 3 or greater. When he deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that library. You gain life equal to its converted mana cost. Until end of turn, you may cast that card, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So let's say on turn 4, you attack. You flip a card that costs 4, like you're against red-green. You flip a Gore Clan Rampager. So you get a 4/4 for white-blue, white-blue. That's pretty neat. And you also gain 4 life off of it, which is a chunk of your life total back. This guy is not worthy of the hype that he's getting, considering, like, oh, he's going to be a replacement for Geist of St. Traft. Geist of St. Traft was much, much better than him. But this guy's going to see play in Standard. I believe that. And we'll just move on. I think the life gain that he can potentially give you, or the land drop. Oh no, you can't even get the lands off of it because it says you may cast, and you don't cast lands, you play them. Okay, moving on. Last card of this preview is Medomia the Ageless. It's a 4/4 for 6. Whenever it deals combat damage, you take an extra turn, and it can't attack during extra turns. You pretty much sold me an extra turn. It's a lot more fragile than something like Time Stop or Time Warp, but it is a Time Stop or Time Warp that eventually kills your opponent. I like this guy a lot. I think it'll see play in control decks. But I don't see it being hugely played. And with that said, we're going to wrap up this little episode of our Theros preview. When we're done with the video, you can scroll down and look at the rankings I gave to the cards. Again, there's no 1 stars. There's either 2, 3, 4, or 5. And tomorrow, we will be back with the black and red cards of Theros. I hope you've enjoyed. If you think I missed something, please let me know in the forums. And I will hear from you all tomorrow with our black and blue, or black and red preview. Thanks for watching.